The Russian Kharkiv offensive has started for more than 3 weeks. Now we can see Russia's main target is not Kharkiv city itself. It's something else. The Ukrainians are facing a much bigger trouble. In today's report, we will talk about the changes in the past 3 days. Then we will talk about the main target of the Russians. Today's report covers information from May 29th to June the 1st. In Kharkiv direction, both the Ukrainian and Russian sources report that there are more and more Russian troops gathering, more than 100,000 already. The Ukrainian COD report shows that throughout 2023, the Russians mobilized 385,000 men. That is more than 32,000 men per month. In 2024, the mobilization continues, which makes the Russians have the numerical advantage. But near Belgorod, we haven't seen any elite forces, especially the airborne forces. Ukrainian Ministry of Defense report shows that the Russians may deploy No. 7th Airborne Division or No. 76th Air Assault Division from Zaporozhye direction to Luhansk or Belgorod. We haven't seen battle report for these two elite forces for the past month. It is very likely they are in rotation, and they may appear in any direction. In Lipsy direction, the Russians have switched to defense mode. Here the main force is the No. 18th Motor Rifle Division. The Ukrainians are attacking Huboki and Luhansk. For the past 3 days, there are no changes in the contact line. In Vovchansk, Ukrainians carried out a successful counter-offensive, but now they are facing some trouble. Around May 23rd, the Ukrainians successfully crossed the bridge and entered north of Vovchansk. There is only one bridge here, which is broken. People can cross the bridge, but not the tanks or armored vehicles, which means the Ukrainians in the northern part don't have armor support. Then the Russians start attacking these Ukrainians. This is the photo Russians bombing the Ukrainians in northern Vovchansk. They're using artilleries and FAB glide bombs. Here we can see this bridge is the only exit for the Ukrainians. In May the 29th, the Russians attack here and control this block, which is next to the bridge, which means the Ukrainians cannot go across the bridge anymore. If they want to go back, they have to swim across the river. Here the main attacking force is the Ukrainian 82nd Air Assault Brigade. They used to be positioned in the southern front. They were the main attacking force in the 2023 offensive. On the Russian side, the 245 Motor Rifle Regiment of 47th Tank Division are operating here, and some regiment of the 2nd Guards Motor Rifle Division are also operating here. There's another thing interesting. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense reports that in Lipsy direction, the Russians switched to defense mode. But in Vovchansk, they didn't stop. They may still attack across the river. I already said this is not a smart move for the Ukrainians to cross the river. They should have stayed in the south and built a defense line. In Luhansk direction, Russians continue attacking. After they captured Berestovi, in this area, the Ukrainians are in danger. The Russians start bombing this town. Stelmakhovka. It's very likely the Russians will start attacking this town in 2 directions, from the north and from the east. Here the Ukrainian Defense Force is the 43rd Mechanized Brigade. But we also know that this brigade was transferred to Kharkiv for reinforcement, which shows that only 1 or 2 battalions of 43rd Brigades are in Kharkiv. Rest of them are still here. We can see that after the Kharkiv offensive, the Ukrainians put out a lot of forces from Luhansk direction to reinforce Kharkiv, which weakened the defense in the Luhansk front. That is why the Russians were able to capture all these areas in the past 3 weeks. The Russians' next target will very likely be this town, Stelmakhovka, in Seversk direction. After the Russians successfully captured some part of Bilohorivka, the fighting continues. The Ukrainians made some counter-offensive here. There were heavy fighting in this town. If the Russians want to capture this town, they will have to capture this high ground. Here the main attacking force is still 106th Airborne Division. There are 3 to 4 former LPR brigades here as well. In Chasiv Yar direction, there were heavy fighting in this micro-district. The 200 Motor Rifle Brigades are attacking Kalinina. The 98th Airborne Division are attacking the micro-district. It is very difficult to attack this area because the attacking force didn't start from here but from Bakhmut. We can see there are 5 kilometers before they can enter micro-district. Once they were observed by the Ukrainian drones, they will face trouble. Even the Russians successfully get into the micro-district. After they put down the infantries, the armored vehicles have to go back. Then the Russian soldiers will have to fight on their own. The Ukrainians have much more forces than the Russians here, so the fightings will be difficult for the Russians. The Russian reinforcement, the weapons and resources have to go through these 5 kilometers before they enter the micro-district. But the Ukrainian reinforcements are only a few hundred meters away in Chasiv Yar main district. That is why the micro-district is so difficult to attack. Do you remember when is the first time the Russians get into the micro-district? It's in April the 14th. The next time the Russians have progress here, capturing the east side and the southern side of the micro-district, is already May the 21st. That is more than 30 days, so you can see how difficult it is. But after the Kharkiv offensive started, many Ukrainian forces, for example the 92nd Brigade, are transferred north for reinforcement. Then the Russians captured this opportunity and made some progress. These days the fightings are still very heavy here. The Russians have the artillery advantage and the Ukrainians got the numbers. So what will happen next? If the Russians are able to capture this micro-district, then they can assemble forces here and then use it as a base to attack Chasiv Yar main district. It will be much easier to attack from here than from Bakhmut. What's more, if the Russians control the micro-district, they can attack north to force the Ukrainians in Kalinina to retreat. Then the Russians will have two bases to attack. It will be much easier than now. So in the coming days, the fighting in micro-district will be very crucial. In Donetsk direction, the Russians continue attacking west, and the Ukrainians carried out some counter-offensive. The Ukrainian 47th Brigade are attacking here from Vovchansk direction, and the Russians are attacking in the fields and captured this area. In the southern part, the Russians already captured Nezhlovy. In the past week, the Russians continue attacking and captured all this valley. The Ukrainians retreat to Nevelsk. Now the Russians don't have to attack in the front. They can flank this village from the north and the Ukrainians have to retreat. So we can see the Russians continue pushing to the west. If the Russians are able to reach this river line, they will be in a very good position for the summer offensive. In Staromayorsk direction, the Russians also made some progress. On May the 30th, the Russians already captured more than half of this town. We can see the river had a U-turn here, and another U-turn here. The Russians are attacking from the west and also from the south. If they are able to reach the river line and also make some progress in the south, then the Ukrainians here will have to retreat. Here the attacking force is 127th Motor Rifle Division. Also the 60th Motor Rifle Brigade are positioned here. From the Ukrainian side, only 58th and 128th Brigades are operating here. Many forces are transferred to Kharkiv for reinforcement. This weakened the Ukrainian defense here. So to conclude the past 3 days, we can see the Ukrainians gathered a lot of forces in Kharkiv and made some successful counter-offensive. But the Ukrainian reserves are stretched all across the front line. So in the east and in the south, they don't have enough defense forces. That's why the Russians are making some progress. We can see the Russians' main target is not Kharkiv. The Russians are only using the Sever Operational Group, which is a newly formed group, and also some forces from Luhansk direction. These are not Russians' elite forces. If the Russians want to capture Kharkiv, we will see some airborne forces arriving. But that didn't happen. So what is the target for the Russians? I believe the Russians are trying to stretch the Ukrainian reserves in the north and to break the Ukrainian rotation plan, so that when the summer offensive is coming, the Ukrainians will be very tired and the reserves will be stretched. And I believe it's very likely in the coming 3 to 4 weeks, the Russians will have a major offensive. It's very likely in the Avdiivka direction, towards Pokrovsk, or in the Marinka direction. Let's see what will happen in the coming month. This is Jason Jiang reporting. Thank you for watching and see you next time.